everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to a new video idea that I got recently from, I believe it was Tori and Jess, who I've seen do these videos where they talk about books that they've just been obsessed with lately. And so I decided to do a sort of just roundup of all of my favorite books that I have read so far this year. So from January to March of 2023. Also, I want to point out that I went overboard with the face glitter today. You know, if I can't go overboard with my makeup on my YouTube channel, when can I go overboard, you know? So have fun looking at all the glitter. I hope that it doesn't blind you. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get into these books. I'm gonna try my best not to talk about all of these books in depth, because I've already done so in previous videos. So let's see, first up we have Sweat and Soap Volume 5. You guys should know at this point that this is my absolute favorite manga series that I have read so far in my pretty short manga reading journey, but this is a slice of life romance series about Notori and Asako, and their romance definitely starts off weird given that they both work for a soap company. Asako works in the finance department, Notori works in the creative department. He comes up with scents and things like that, and so let's just say he has a very sensitive nose, and upon first meeting Asako, he realizes that he is just obsessed with her natural scent. And so that's kind of what starts their relationship. And what is so amazing about their romance is just how sweet and adorable they are together, and just how openly they communicate with each other. It's unlike anything I've seen in romance before. It just feels very unique to me. So in Volume 5, as you can kind of tell, they're in coats and scarves. This takes place during Christmas and New Year's, which was just really cute to see because it was their first Christmas together, and Notori is meeting Asako's family for the first time. And then it's also centering around the two of them moving in together, and so they're going to view apartments and things like that. And I know that sounds so mundane and so boring, right? But I don't know how this author does it. I am so invested in every little thing that this couple does together. I don't care if they're just sitting around eating dinner or, like I said, viewing apartments and things like that. Like, I'm just so invested. I'm definitely going to read Volume 6 soon because I am dying for more Notori and Asako in my life. Next up, we have a romance novella that took me by surprise. I didn't realize I was going to love it quite as much as I did. That is Gym Bunny by Brianna Hale. This is book 2 in this Dom Fitness novella series. I had first heard about these novellas from Brie from In Love and Words, and she was raving and raving about this second novella in particular, and I totally understand why. It definitely has a different vibe from book 1, which is just called Dom Fitness. But this little series centers around this gym where all the personal trainers are dominants and all of the clients that go to get trained are submissives. So we do have that dom sub dynamic going on, but nothing sexual is happening at this gym. It's purely for fitness, right? And so in the second novella, we have Livia, who, as you can tell from the cover, she is plus sized, and she was in a very toxic and abusive relationship with a dom in the past. And so now she has all of this trauma surrounding just doms in general and pretty much the BDSM community. And so she sees Trey, our hero, he's standing outside of Dom Fitness just handing out flyers. And so Livia is just freaked out by the idea of this gym being run by doms. But Trey is definitely a cinnamon roll hero. He's a softer dom. I featured him in my recent video where I was talking about Cinedoms, which are my personal favorite kind of romance heroes. I will link that video up in the cards above if you're curious. But I just love how he introduces Livia to what a healthy dom-sub relationship should be like, and how there's all kinds of different dom-sub dynamics. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing, and I just thought this was wonderful. You don't have to read book 1, but I would recommend it because it was a fun time. I just didn't love it as much as I loved Gym Bunny. So next up we have another personal trainer romance. Did I even mention that Trey ends up being Livia's personal trainer? I don't think that I did, but I love personal trainer romances. Oh my God, if you have recommendations, leave them in the comments below. I have gotten some recommendations from you guys in the past when I was talking about both this book and Gym Bunny in one of my, I think it was like my January wrap up, but I can always use more recommendations. So this is Weightless by Candy Steiner. This one is definitely more of a new adult romance. We have our heroine Natalie, she's about 18 years old. She just recently graduated from high school, and then we have Rhodes, who's about 21, and he is a personal trainer at this country club. And Natalie's mom tells her about Rhodes because they are members of the country club. And so Natalie goes to him for some personal training, and Rhodes is definitely a grumpy hero. For sure, he is definitely damaged as well because of things that have happened in his past. But he also has this incredibly sweet side to him. There's this amazing scene that lives in my head rent-free when Rose and Natalie have gotten closer at this point, and he puts Natalie in front of a mirror and he tells her to tell him all the parts of her body that she hates about herself. And so she's naming these different parts of herself, and he kisses them reverently, and it's just such a sweet and swoony scene. This book also has like a mystery suspense element to it as well that I didn't expect. So there's just a lot of good things going for this book that I just couldn't help but give it 5 stars. Might as well talk about my 2 favorite Sophie Lark books that I have read so far this year. First up, we're going to talk about Ivan, which is book 1 in her Underworld series. So in Sophie's reading order that she recommends, you should read Ivan and Snow, which is book 2 of this series, before you can jump into The Bully, which is book 3 of her Kingmaker Chronicles series, and I'll get back to this series in a minute. But this one follows Ivan, who is a Bratva boss. This takes place in St. Petersburg in Russia. And we have Sloane, our heroine, who is an assassin sent to kill Ivan, and she infiltrates her way into his compound. Right before she kills him, she realizes, oops, he wasn't actually asleep. He takes her prisoner in his basement and uses some very interesting methods of torture on her to get some answers out of her. It's amazing. It's incredible. I loved Ivan and Sloane's characters individually, and also their romance was just so addictive. This was perfectly paced. I was sucked in from page 1, and it didn't let me go until the very end. I think that this book would be a really great gateway into Sophie Lark's books. So if you're not quite sure if her books or her writing are going to be for you, I would recommend maybe trying this book out first, and then you could jump into her Brutal Birthright series, because I feel like this book stands on its own in a lot of ways. But yes, this was absolutely fantastic. Next up, I have to bring up The Heir by Sophie Lark. So this is book 1 in her Kingmaker Chronicles series, which is a next generation spin-off series of her Brutal Birthright mafia romances. And this series centers around Kingmakers, which is essentially a mafia college. Basically, people in the mafia world from all over the globe, they send their children here to study what it's like to actually, you know, be in the mafia, whether you're an heir or you're training to be an enforcer or a spy or an accountant. There's a lot of different jobs within the mafia for sure. And so this one is a love triangle between Leo and Anna. It's their romance. And then we have Dean, who has also fallen for Anna. And it's essentially Dean's villain origin story while also being Leo and Anna's friends to lovers romance. And this series, this book took me quite by surprise. I really didn't know quite what to expect out of it, being that at the end of the day this is a romance series, but there's so many other things going on with Kingmakers in general. There's this challenge known as like the Quartum Bellum, and there's all this drama and tea having to do with the other students at this school. Like, it definitely will give you like slight Gossip Girl vibes, maybe Vampire Academy vibes. Though Leo and Anna's romance is not my favorite Sophie Lark romance ever, it was the combination of their romance with, like I said, Dean's villain origin story and the school itself. Like, everything just came together so perfectly. Next up, I'll talk about a couple historical romances that have been my favorites so far this year. First and foremost, we gotta talk about The Duke Gets Even by Joanna Shupe. This is the 4th and final book in her Fifth Avenue Rebels series. This was finally Nellie and the Duke of Lockwood's romance, and this totally gave me everything that I could have wanted from their romance and more. I actually ranted and raved about this book in my, I think it was my Novellathon reading vlog. I'll link that up in the cards above. I literally talked about this book for 20 minutes in that vlog, when this was a book that wasn't even a part of Novellathon because it's not a novella, but like, oh my god, I could not help but gush about this book. I've also talked about it in wrap-ups and different videos like that. But this is truly the best book that I've read by Joanna Shupe, and I've read pretty much everything that she's written at this point. Truly the best book of the series as well. I mean, it was just everything. I love these characters with my heart and soul. I loved their character arcs in general. Of course, their romance was fantastic. The spice was amazing because we know that Joanna Shupe will serve the spice. I could go on and on and on and on about how amazing this book was, but I need to rein myself in. Like I said, if you really want to see me just gush about this book, check out that reading blog that I just mentioned. I also have to bring up Devil in Spring by Lisa Kleypas. This is book 3 in her Ravenel series. This is Pandora and Gabriel's romance, and just like the first 2 books in the series, this book was just so like whimsical and enchanting, and the romance was just so swoony and beautiful and amazing. And bonus for this book is that we get to see Evie and Sebastian as parents, because they are Gabriel's parents, the hero in this book. And though I have my issues with Sebastian in Devil in Winter, you know, his book, I have to say that I love Daddy Sebastian with my heart and soul, and I love that we got a couple chapters in their POV. I love Pandora. She's a very quirky, independent heroine, and Gabriel just falls hard for her, and the plot was really great as well. Like, this was just a wonderful historical romance. I love the Ravenel series so much. For something quite a bit different from the historicals that I just talked about, we have Hold by Claire Kent. This is a dystopian space survival romance. It's actually book 1 in a romance series, though each romance is definitely a standalone. Okay. Wow, like where do I even start with talking about this book? We have a heroine, Rihanna. She is an archaeologist. She's doing a dig on this random planet when she is caught by the Coalition doing a dig where she isn't supposed to. She only got permission for like a very specific area on the planet. And so they throw her in prison on this just prison planet. And all the prisoners are just in one big area. There are really no cells. There's like a couple here and there that some prisoners have taken control of, but the majority of the prisoners are just in this one big ass room together, which of course is a recipe for disaster, and that's absolutely terrifying. And so the officer that puts Rihanna, you know, in this prison tells her, hey, you need to find the strongest man here and just get him to protect you. So she makes eye contact with this man, Kane, who has his own cell with a working door. He also has his own bathroom, so that's like the ideal situation. And so she willingly gives herself to Kane so that he will protect her. And so over the course of this novella, they start falling for each other. Nobody writes like Claire Kent, in my opinion. Her writing style is just so addictive, and even though this is definitely a very morally gray situation, I could not help but root for Kane and Rihanna to be together. There was quite a bit of suspense in this throughout. Like I said, this is definitely a terrifying situation, and I loved Kane. He's the perfect grumpy hero, but he shows his love, his growing love for Rihanna through his actions. Claire Kent is amazing at writing those types of heroes. Next up, we have a romance that has just had all the hype surrounding it, both from Book Talk and Bookstagram and BookTube. The romance community has fallen head over heels for this author in general, but this book is just incredibly hyped up, and I finally read it recently, and I have to agree that it's worth the hype. That is Heartless by Elsie Silver. This is book 2 in her Chestnut Spring series. This is a Daddy Cade and Willa's romance. It's a nanny romance, in case you don't know. Cade is looking for someone to take care of his 5-year-old son, Luke, and Willa is best friends with Summer, who is the heroine from book 1 of the series, Flawless. And so Cade and Willa couldn't be more different. This is definitely like a Grumpy Sunshine, opposites attract romance, and Cade is just a wonderful, wonderful man, and I love how fiery and bold Willa is. There are a lot of scenes in this that live in my head rent-free, not just the sex scenes, but there's just a lot of like iconic and funny moments in this book, and the romance between these two is absolutely beautiful. I understand why it is so hyped up. And then I have 2 more books I want to quickly mention. First is Eleanor and Gray by Brittany Cherry. I mentioned this in my most recent wrap-up, so if you want a more in-depth discussion, definitely check out that wrap-up. It will be linked up in the cards above. This is also a nanny romance. I didn't know to expect that going in, because I go into a lot of the books that I read blind, so I had no idea what direction this plot was going to go in. But this is a childhood friends to lovers romance. I feel Brittany Cherry does those so well. Behind the Bars was also a childhood friends to lovers romance, and that's just one of my favorite romances I've ever read at this point. But yeah, Eleanor and Gray start falling for each other when they're in high school, but Eleanor's mother gets very ill from cancer, and so her and her family decide to move to Florida so that her mother can spend her last few months on the beach, basically. And so that leads to a like 15-year separation between Eleanor and Gray. And so when they come back together, it's because Eleanor is getting a job as a nanny for this very wealthy man who turns out to be Gray. Turns out that he got married some years back and he now has 2 daughters, but his wife passed away in a car accident that the whole family had gotten into. And so now Gray is just very cold. He's a husk of a person, and Eleanor worms her way back into his heart. And she also builds amazing relationships with his daughters. And this was just stunning, absolutely beautiful. I cried. As usual with Brittany Cherry, yeah, her books get me. They will pull at your heartstrings for sure. And I'm very excited to read the Landon and Shay duet, because that couple was featured quite a bit throughout this book. Last but certainly not least, I have to mention Unveiled by Courtney Milan. I also discussed this quite a bit in my most recent wrap-up, and we discussed this a lot in Lisa and I's most recent Blushing Blue Stocking Society live show, so I'll also link that up in the cards above if you are curious. But this is a book that we kind of picked on a whim. I just knew that I really wanted to dive more into Courtney Milan's backlist. I've only read 2 of her books in the past. I had read The Duke Who Didn't, which is a rom-com, which is a very different vibe from like everything else Courtney Milan has ever written. She definitely tends to write more dramatic books. I've also read Unlocked, which is actually a novella in this same series. This is the Turner series, which centers around these 3 brothers. But this one has a revenge plot, which, if you don't know, I am a sucker for a good revenge plot. But this plot is very complicated as well, because basically our hero Ash, he has brought to light that this Duke was a bigamist. He was actually already married to someone else when he married Margaret, our heroine's mother. And so now Margaret and her brothers are bastards. They are illegitimate. And so because Ash is a distant cousin of this Duke, and because he brought this scandal to light, he is now the heir to the dukedom instead of one of Margaret's brothers. And so the catalyst for this plot really is when Ash comes to the ducal estate to confront this old Duke about what he did to Ash's sister. That's the whole reason why he is set out to ruin this Duke and his children. And Margaret is now undercover working as the Duke's nurse when she's actually his daughter. And this is an angsty time for sure, with a dash of hidden identity. Wow, there were just so many layers to this story and to this romance. Ash is a new book boyfriend for me. We love a hero who just wants to set the heroine free. This was just beautiful and amazing, and Courtney Milan really makes you wait for that HEA until like the 98% mark. It really comes in clutch. But yeah, this was just absolutely fantastic. So that's going to be it for my top favorite reads that I have read so far this year, books that I'm absolutely obsessed with. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to tell me about books that you have absolutely been loving so far this year. I would also love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!